While we all have been watching the Israel-Iran war, many may have missed this crucial detail. On March 14, 2026, Iran fired what may turn out to be the most consequential shot in this entire war. It wasn't a missile. A senior Iranian official told CNN that Tehran would consider allowing oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz again, but only if the cargo was traded in Chinese yuan. Not dollars, but yuan. Most people read that headline and moved on. They shouldn't have. Because in 15 words, Iran didn't just propose a ceasefire condition, it proposed a restructuring of the global financial system, the one that has kept America at the center of the world economy for 52 years. In today's episode of Logistically Speaking, we look at this story about money, power, game theory, and the most elegant financial trap ever constructed in a war zone. And to understand why it matters to every economy, every central bank, and every household on earth. Let's start with 1974. The year was 1974 and the world was reeling from the first oil shock. America's gold-backed dollar was just being decoupled from gold by Nixon in 1971. The global monetary system was in free fall. Into this vacuum stepped Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State and the architect of America's grand strategy. The deal he struck with Saudi Arabia, never codified in a public treaty and never voted in any legislature, became the invisible foundation of modern global finance. Saudi Arabia would price all oil export in US dollar, and in return, America would provide military protection and security guarantees. OPEC followed the same, and by 1975, every barrel of oil traded on earth was priced in US dollar. The consequences were extraordinary and self-reinforcing. Every country that needed oil, meaning every country on earth, now needed dollar first. Central banks accumulated dollar reserves and oil exporters recycled their dollar revenue into US Treasury bonds. America could borrow cheaply, fund its deficit, and project financial power globally through a currency that the entire world was structurally compelled to hold. This arrangement gave the United States immense economic influence, allowing it to fund deficit, maintain global financial stability, and inflict severe economic penalties through dollar-based sanction. And this is the petrodollar system. And it has been a silent engine of American superpower for 52 years until now. To understand Iran's move, you first need to understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is, financially and not just geographically. During 2023 to 2025, 20% of the world's LNG and 25% of seaborne crude oil trade pass through the strait annually, which is a 21-mile wide channel between Iran and Oman. The Persian Gulf is essentially a closed body of water with a single exit, and that exit is the strait. Saudi oil, Emirati oil, Kuwaiti oil, Qatari gas, all of it moves through this Iran's geographic neighborhood. The February-March 2026 conflict represents the most severe disruption to Hormuz traffic in the waterway's modern history, with tanker traffic dropping to near zero following the US-Israeli strike that began on February 28. And then on March 5th, something remarkable happened. The international group of 12 P&I Club, that is the protection and indemnity insurance providers covering around 90% of the world's ocean-going tonnage, they all withdrew their cover for ships transiting through the strait. This means 90% of the world's merchant fleet lost insurance coverage for Gulf transit in a single day. War risk premium for Persian Gulf voyages reached 7.5% of hull value by March 14, according to Lloyd's of London syndicate, and which is comparison to 0.05% before the conflict. That is a 150 times increase. Ships weren't just being blocked by Iranian drones. They were being priced out by the Western insurance markets. According to Lloyd's List Intelligence, only 77 ships transited the Strait of Hormuz in the first half of March 2026. And in normal times, that number would be closer to 1,000. The world was now desperate for a solution. Iran had one, and they attached a price to it. A senior Iran official told CNN, Tehran is considering allowing a limited number of oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, but only if the cargo is traded in Chinese yuan. The condition, if formalized, would represent the most significant challenge to the petrodollar system in its 52-year history. I will explain what this actually means. Iran is not asking countries to abandon the dollar. It is simply proposing a toll condition. If you want to use this choke point, the one through which 1/5 of the world's oil pass through, you pay the toll in yuan. Imagine you run a highway and you tell truck drivers, you can use this road, but you can only pay the toll in Chinese money and not American money. If tankers comply, it means oil will be officially traded in yuan at the world's most important energy choke point. And this proposal is not a mere proposal. It is a trap. Iran's real lever is not the currency itself. It is the uncertainty. Pay in yuan and passage is guaranteed. Continue paying in dollars and the uncertainty remains. You cannot bomb a currency condition. You cannot sanction away a geographic reality. The United States can destroy Iran's air defense, but it cannot destroy Iran's location on the map. This was not built in desperation. It was built deliberately, patiently, and in coordination with Beijing. And the groundwork that make it possible has been under construction for years. What looks like an improvised wartime maneuver is actually the activation of infrastructure that China spent a decade building. In 2018, China launched the Shanghai International Energy Exchange, the first platform in history that allowed oil futures to be bought and sold in yuan backed by gold. The petro-yuan contract was never meant to replace the dollar overnight. It was meant to build the plumbing, the accounts, the settlement, the system, and the currency swap agreements, and the financial relationship that could make yuan oil payment possible when the moment comes. Then there is SIPS, that is a cross-border interbank payment system, which is China's answer to the SWIFT financial messaging network that America controlled. China's SIPS process equivalent of 245 trillion in yuan denominated transaction in 2025 alone, which is a 43% increase from the year before. And as of January 2025, SIPS has 1,467 indirect participants across 119 countries, linking 4,800 banks in 185 countries. And then there is mBridge, perhaps the most consequential financial technology that people may have never heard of. A blockchain-based platform using central bank digital currencies from China, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand. mBridge offers transaction times reduced from days to seconds, which costs potentially half compared to traditional cross-border payments. And by November 2025, mBridge had already processed over $55.5 billion in transactions, with the digital yuan accounting for 95% of the volume. The infrastructure was ready, and since February 28, 2026, 11.7 million barrels of Iran crude oil have moved from Iranian ports to Chinese refineries, not through the international shipping system that run on dollar payment and Western insurance, but through a shadow fleet of ships with every single barrel settled outside the US dollar. The game was already being played, and the yuan condition was just the public announcement. Let me explain this through the lens of game theory, because that is precisely what Iran's strategists did. There are 4 players in this game: Iran, China, the United States, and every oil importing nation on earth. Firstly, Iran's option. Keep the strait closed. Oil prices spike, but Iran loses $3 billion a month in its own export revenue. Next, open it in dollar. Surrender all leverage, gains nothing, and the war was financially pointless. Or open it in yuan. Collect revenue, weaponize the choke point financially, chips away at the dollar without firing a single additional missile. Iran's dominant strategy is clear. The yuan offer costs them nothing and gains everything. When it comes to China's option, they are pursuing a strategy of careful balance. While it may accept limited yuan-based transactions to secure oil import, it is unlikely to support full escalation that threatens stability in a strait through which roughly 40% of its own import pass. But its interest is clear. If yuan becomes the Hormuz standard, China's currency goes global almost overnight. And China's dominant strategy is to back Iran's offer quietly, which it is already doing. America has multiple options. First option is to force the strait open militarily, but bombs don't work on financial proposal. Next option is to accept the yuan arrangement, destroy the petrodollar system, which they have been protecting for the last 52 years. Then, the next option, sanction every country that pays in yuan, but that is 40 or more desperate nation. You will be sanctioning the world. As of now, it did not look like there is any good move left for America. This is what strategists call a dominant strategy trap. And every oil importing nation faces what game theorists call a classic prisoner's dilemma. If all nations refuse the yuan condition collectively, Iran backs down, the dollar survives, oil prices normalize. But if your nation refuses while others accept, you may not get the oil. Your economy collapses, and so what does every nation quietly do? It accepts. This is precisely how the petrodollar might die. Not in a war, but in 1,000 silent self-interested decisions. The stable outcome of these games would be the point where no player can improve their position by changing strategy. And it's a bifurcated oil market. Dollar price for the West, yuan price for Asia. The petrodollar doesn't explode, it splits. There is one player we haven't yet discussed, and it may be the most important of all, Saudi Arabia. The petrodollar was not a treaty, it was a relationship, a commitment built on personal bonds between America and Saudi Arabian leadership, backed by military guarantees and common interest. Saudi Arabia have not formally agreed to price oil in yuan on a permanent basis. However, the kingdom effectively entered its exclusive commitment to dollar pricing in June 2024 and has built the technical infrastructure for yuan settlement through a $7 billion currency swap with China and in participation in the mBridge payment platform. Saudi Arabia joined BRICS in 2024. It is building Vision 2030, a multi-trillion-dollar economic transformation that requires Chinese investment, Chinese technology, and Chinese market access. Its largest export customer is no longer America, it is China. A full Saudi pivot to accepting yuan for oil would represent a structural endpoint for the petrodollar system. Riyadh has not made that decision yet, but the infrastructure is ready, the relationship is there, and wartime pressures are accelerating the calculus. The implication for Saudi Arabia's 5-decade petrodollar contract with the United States are existential, and Riyadh knows about it. Of all the nations caught on this prisoner's dilemma, India faces perhaps the most acute version of the problem. India imports over 85% of its crude oil. The Gulf is not merely a trading partner, it is a lifeline. And India is already deeply exposed. The rupee is under pressure and import bills surge with every dollar that oil rises. And the RBI must choose between defending the currency and keeping the economy from overheating. India already buys Russian oil in Indian rupees, a precedent that has normalized non-dollar oil settlement within its own financial system. If India now pays in yuan for Gulf oil, it shifts its reserve strategy, increases rupee pressure and risks inflation. If India refuses the yuan condition and others accept, it gets no oil. GDP will be impacted and will lead to political crisis. Countries like South Korea and Japan face pressure. Disruption have already led Tokyo and Seoul to evaluate national stockpiles and alternative sourcing, with Japanese shipping firms pausing operations near the strait and South Korean refiners monitoring supplies closely. The geopolitical lesson that India is drawing from this crisis is the same one every energy importing nation is drawing. Single corridor dependency is existential vulnerability. The push to accelerate domestic renewable energy, alternative sourcing, and strategic reserve building, already which is underway before the war, has become more crucial and urgent. India is stuck in the most painful corner of this game, and New Delhi knows it. Good analysis demand intellectual honesty. The dollar is not finished, not even close yet. The yuan currently accounts for approximately 3% of global payments compared to $48%. SIPS, despite its rapid growth, remains structurally smaller than SWIFT. The dollar retains its dominant position in global energy trade, and that status is protected by remarkable institutional depth, the liquidity of US financial market, the network effect of dollar-denominated contracts worldwide, and the institutional inertia of a system built over 50 years. Analysts note that enforcing yuan-only condition for Hormuz transit presents real technical hurdles. Verifying currency settlement in real time amid complex shipping arrangements which will remain difficult, and compliance could expose bias to US secondary sanctions risk. And there is a historical precedent worth studying. In 1971, Nixon entered dollar-gold convertibility. The world panicked, analysts declared the dollar finished. Instead, Kissinger engineered the petrodollar, and dollar dominance actually increased for the next 50 years. Could America engineer a new stabilizing arrangement again? Perhaps. But in 1971, America had Kissinger. Today, it has bombs and sanctions. That is very different toolkit. The dollar is not dying, but it is being structurally tested in ways it has never been tested before. Simultaneously, from the geographic choke point of Hormuz and from the payment infrastructure of ships and Enbridge, and from the quiet, self-interested decision of 40 nations that need oil more than they need to maintain the American financial system. So where does this all go from here? Let me talk on the probability as per multiple analysis. Scenario 1, dollar survives, and the probability of that is 25%. US military and diplomatic pressure forces Iran to drop the yuan condition. The strait reopens on dollar terms, oil fall back towards $75. The petrodollar is stressed but intact. But this requires either a negotiated settlement, which is currently stalled with the Iranian foreign minister denying any ceasefire talk, or a military outcome that removes Iran's ability to enforce a choke point condition. Scenario 2, the market bifurcates where the probability of that is 55%. The dollar retains its dominant position in Western energy trade, while yuan-priced oil becomes the standard for Asian importers transiting the strait. The petrodollar weakens gradually over 12 to 36 months. Crude stabilizes between $90 and $110. Gold continues its structural upward move, and US debt servicing costs rise as structural demand for US treasuries slowly erodes, and it would be worrying for a country already approaching $39 trillion in government debt. This is not a collapse, it is a slow restructuring. And slow restructurings are often more consequential than fast ones. Scenario 3, alternative system emerge where the probability is 20%. 10 or more nations quietly accept yuan terms. Saudi Arabia makes a partial pivot. The dollar's reserve currency premium begins declining faster than any model currently projects. The Hormuz precedent will extend beyond the Persian Gulf. Every government with access to strategic waterways like Malacca, Suez might even look at weaponizing choke points to reshape global currency markets. Crude would continue at $150 or maybe even higher, and gold at $4,000. Global recession risk will become acute and would command serious attention from every policymaker, every treasurer, and every supply chain strategic on earth. Let me talk on what history will record about March 2026. The United States and Israel launched a strike on Iran on February 28. The military objectives were clear. The financial consequences were not. The Hormuz blockade did not just disrupt 20% of global oil supply, it unplugged the machine that has kept the dollar at the center of global finance since 1974. Iran responded not with a counterattack that America could defeat militarily, it responded with a game theory, a currency condition attached to a geographic choke point, backed by a decade of Chinese financial infrastructure and enforced by simple, brutal logic of energy desperation. The lesson for every nation, every company, and every supply chain professional is the same. In the modern world, financial architecture is geopolitical infrastructure. The payment system you depend on, and the currency your reserves are held on, and the insurance market that underwrite your trade, these are not neutral technical systems. They are instruments of power, and when they fracture, everything built on them take a beating. Military superiority can clear a ceiling, but it cannot force a merchant to use specific ledger. The war started with the missiles, and now it will be decided by currencies. And the world that emerges from this conflict, whether in 3 months or in 3 years, will not look like the world that endured it. Thank you for watching till the end. Hope this analysis gave you a different dimension on your views about the Gulf War. See you next week.